Welcome, investigator. Evil is on the rise. Crime is escalating. Our mission is to eliminate the crime by exposing evil, examine why it manifests, and highlight the brave souls that confront it every day. Join us as we work together to bring justice to every victim. Welcome to All Things Crime. Here's your host, Jared Bradley.
This was a dual track, right? So once you discovered who the victim was, then that, like you said earlier, that kind of opened doors, right?
Absolutely, it did. And so, and we'd, obviously our hope was to completely solve this, but these cases are really tough. These cold cases are really hard to close and to solve. So after she was identified, which we were really thankful for, and like we talked about, so we turned our sights kind of back to the evidence. Okay, and certainly the background of Lina, her husband Edward, people who'd come forward and talked about concerns about Edward and things that he'd said and done, and maybe the kind of person that he was. It definitely wasn't enough for us to call him a suspect, but it was certainly enough to make us look at him, right? So, and the more we learned, the more we're like, this is the direction it was heading. But that's not enough to even really call him a suspect, or certainly not enough to close the case. And we could spend a lot of time going into all the details of that. But just suffice to say, there was a lot of circumstantial things that pointed toward her husband Edward. So in looking at this evidence, and I was working here with one of our analysts, Kathy Mackey. She's an analyst with the Statewide Informational Analysis Center, the SIAC. It's a fusion center here in Utah, and it's part of the Department of Public Safety. And they're awesome. They do awesome work. Kathy is even more awesome. She's very passionate about these cold cases. In fact, she manages Utah's cold case database, and she works tirelessly for these cases. She's organized a cold case review board where we collaborate with agencies all over the state of Utah to try to solve cold cases. And Kathy's huge so in that regard. So she got looking, and she knew someone named Francine Bardol. And Francine Bardol was a CSI here in Utah. And she had some really good success using what we call this evidence collection method called the M-Vac. And which is a way to collect evidence, and it basically uses a sterile solution, and it basically sucks things out of basically a vacuum process, and it deposits all of that on through a filter. So it's a lot more comprehensive than your standard. Let's swab it with a buccal swab or basically a Q-tip. Something porous like a rope, as you can see, is very challenging with standard standard collection methods. So Kathy came to me and she said, well, there's Francine Bardol who has amazing success with the M-Vac system. She's using it for homicides. She's using it on gun cases. She's getting really good results, getting DNA off of items of evidence that are typically historically difficult to collect with traditional methods. I was not familiar with this, so thanks to Kathy, who brought this to my attention. We consulted with Francine Bardol, who was able to. We worked again with M-Vac, and we are able to get. And we have to understand too. So to outsource to other entities, it takes funding and it takes money, but we had some help. We had some good assistance there, and ultimately we took this evidence, namely the rope. We took the rope and the plastic is what we took to Francine, and we had her perform her collection method using this machine, this collection method M-Vac, and she did. And she collected it, and she has it deposits into these filters that can then be analyzed. So the other side of that coin was now we'd collected it, but we had to have a lab that can analyze that DNA. Typically, in something like that, you're going to have a mixed sample of DNA, and one of the challenges historically would be to, when you have mixed samples, we haven't always been able to separate those samples out with our software and technology. So if you had a mixed sample, like, if you had one sample you could, work with, multiple samples became challenging. So I had to wait for a lab here in Utah, Intermountain Forensics Lab, who was coming online, who would have the ability to analyze this old degraded DNA and potentially mixtures, right? So we had to wait for them to come online, which took some time for this lab to come online. We can utilize them, because we knew we had what we had from what Francine did with using M-Vac. But we had to have a lab to analyze it. The other obstacle we had was Edward Geddes, had been passed away in 2001 and was cremated. So there's no DNA we could do a direct comparison. If we had DNA from the rope or from this evidence, we couldn't analyze it or compare it to him because his DNA was basically gone. So we looked at family members, direct family members, sons, brothers, to collect and then get familial matches, which we obtained a couple of samples by their consent, and we had it in our evidence between Utah and Youngstown, Ohio. We collected that evidence, and we kind of held on to it till this lab came online. Ultimately, when the lab came online, we did a comparison with the DNA from the rope to the family members that were collected of Edward Geddes, and we got a confirmation that they were familial matches. So this was, this is the direction that we needed it to go. Of course, we still had one more family member that we had to not only exclude, but there's basically three men on the planet that would effectively be a familial match to Edward Geddes, and we had to rule all three of them out. The third family member, would not consent. We had to do a search warrant, and even that was challenging, tracking him down, tracking it down. And one thing, the Intermountain Forensics Lab, they did give us the familial match to the two family members to what's on the rope, but they also said, well, we have a mixed sample of there's at least two male samples on this rope. And what they were using at the time, they didn't really have the ability to unmix those samples. So again, I consulted with Francine Bardol, who's now with Cold Case Solutions here in the Utah, in the Salt Lake Valley, and she's utilizing a lab, Pure Gold Forensics, actually based in California, who'd had really good success with these mixtures. So we consulted, and mind you, we had to still get approval, and someone's got to pay for all this, right? Private labs, and my administration was awesome with that. It just takes time. So we ended up getting that third and final sample from this family member with a search warrant that came here to SBI, and then we sent everything, that sample as well as the two previous samples, to Pure Gold Forensics, and they were awesome because they confirmed the familial matches with all three family members with over 99% accuracy rate. So we knew that the DNA was Edward Geddes. We knew that. That's the only possible explanation, a scientific explanation. So we knew we had his match on the rope that bound Lina after death. So we knew we had that. The problem was we had another male's sample on that rope. This was a mixed sample, but Pure Gold Forensics was able to unmix that sample effectively, and we were able to get two CODIS eligible DNA profiles, which basically means to upload into CODIS, which is a national database for DNA. It has to meet certain requirements. It has to be of a certain quality, and I'm no scientist, but just because you have a DNA profile doesn't mean it's CODIS eligible. It's got to be good enough, right, and be accurate enough to upload. Well, both of these samples were CODIS eligible. So Pure Gold Forensics was able to link up with a department who had upload into CODIS for us, and we got a CODIS hit on the unknown male profile on the rope. So we knew the one profile was Edward Geddes, his both DNA profiles are uploaded into CODIS. Geddes profile didn't hit to anything in CODIS, but the other profile did hit to a homicide in Montana from 2011. And at first we're like, wow, do we have a whole other victim, right? But who is this? Who is this other profile? We don't know. So I called the detective in Montana. As we consulted and talked, their victim up there, and by the way, we couldn't see initially anything that would have connected our two victims, right? But their victim up there was tied up with rope and these unique knots. So as we talked, we realized we both had utilized the same knot expert to analyze our knots of our rope. And we thought, well, maybe it's his DNA. Maybe he had inadvertently, accidentally contaminated the rope with his DNA, because now our technology is so sensitive that it doesn't take much to deposit DNA on evidence. So we're able to determine that yes, in a pretty quick, short order, we were able to determine it was and rule him out. So we knew that second sample was the knot expert, which obviously had handled both of our ropes in both of our cases and had inadvertently contaminated our evidence, but it only left Edward Geddes' DNA on that rope. And given the totality of circumstances with what we knew, everything leading up, everything about Edward, about all kinds of things that, again, we don't really have time to get into, comparing that with this rope, the only person believed to be involved in Lina's death was Edward Geddes. And certainly if he were alive today, we'd pursue charges of homicide against him. But effectively, what solved this second, so the first part was, like you talked about, the identification of Lina, which was huge and amazing. And the second part, the second prong, like you described, was this identification through the DNA. So thanks to Francine Bardot and her skill of what she does, utilizing this technology of the M-Vac that we needed. As you can imagine, something porous like rope or clothing can be difficult to swab, but the M-Vac's very comprehensive. It pulls everything out. Then when you combine that with the right forensic lab, with the right software technology, who has the ability to separate it out and deal with those results, because if you don't have that right technology, and not all labs have that, you're just going to get an inconclusive result. But with that expertise of pure gold as well, you can't argue with the science that we got two CODIS eligible profiles and are able to rule the one sample out as the contamination, basically exclusion there, matching with over 99% certainty that the other sample was Edward Geddes from the family members. So it just took a long time to get to that point. So we were just very, very fortunate in a lot of ways to have these things come together for both prongs to effectively solve the case. And there's no other people but believed to be involved in her death other than Edward Geddes.
Congratulations, by the way. That's just fantastic, man.
Thank you.
I mean, these kind of stories, again, with 230,000 cold case homicides out there, and if you include rapes and assaults and all those, it's got to be millions.
Yeah.
There's just so many cold cases out there. It's just it's tragic and it's scary at the same time. So when we get a win like this, let's celebrate it. That's awesome. And you guys deserve a lot of credit. Your persistence, and I know you guys run into walls all the time, but you just either figure out a way through it or around it or go a different direction. And that's but the sheer fact that you guys just never quit is just an inspiration to all of us. But before we close up here, a couple of questions that I had as you were talking and describing, how you actually identified Mr. Geddes as the killer. What were some of the walls that you guys ran into?
With Edward?
Yeah.
Yeah, sir.
So now, wasn't, like, for example, wasn't the rope tested before?
It was. Yes, it had been tested prior to, 2 to 3 times. Well, the evidence in general, and some of the evidence was here, some of it was with Garfield County Sheriff. We were able to pull it all up here, and stuff had gone to the crime lab. And so that had been tested previously back, 1998, and then more recently, in recent years. technology is always advancing and changing. So it was tested. Some more of it was tested in 2012, I believe, and I had some more tested in like 2016-ish. So some of that evidence was tested 3 times. In particular, the items that she was, wrapped or bound with no results. Other than the only DNA was ever found was with that other victim. So yes, it had been tested with kind of more conventional process, but the process that we used, that's what got us there. It pulled everything. I guess it's everything, but it pulled what we needed out of that rope to get quite a lot of DNA. And I didn't mention too. So even before, like when you did the results from what was M-Vac from the rope, we knew that they did an initial quant analysis. The lab did before we did any comparisons to family members. They had 117 nanograms of DNA on that rope. And just to give you an idea of how much that is, that's actually a lot of DNA to measure. I mean, you can get a full DNA profile off, one nanogram, actually, I think even less, even half a nanogram. We had 117 nanograms, so that's a significant amount of DNA from that rope. And we knew that of that, 91% of it was male DNA. Not female, but male. So we knew we had something when we got that initial quant of the DNA. But then again, it just takes process.
What was that like when they called you and told you about those quants?
Oh man, I was so excited. So excited. I was like, wow, we've got something here. We've got something here. And then, of course, the next hurdle was, okay, well, we have that, but we got to have something to compare it to, and we'd hoped we'd get some kind of CODIS eligible profile to run. And ultimately we did. We got the CODIS profiles uploaded, and we got the familial matches to Edward Geddes. So those are all obstacles, and you hit so many dead ends with these cases. You hit so many dead ends, and it's frustrating. You're like, oh man, and sometimes you got to just be patient and wait. You're like, okay, till something else trickles in, or you get some little tidbit, you can go, okay, now let me jump on this, and you have to follow that till you either takes you somewhere or it dead ends, right? So ultimately that's what got us there was the DNA, and which is amazing for a lot of people and their expertise that I'm really thankful for that we have that technology and ability, and there's people that are smart enough to do that stuff to get us this answer.
Yeah, that's fantastic, man. So, one last question. So, and this is more about you. So you said you've been in law enforcement now 23 years.
Yeah.
And so kind of what initially inspired you to get into law enforcement?
Well, I think law enforcement is one of those things where it's either for you or it's not. And even as a young kid, I was like, man, I don't know why. I just always wanted to be a cop. I'd watch TV shows. I'm like, I want to be a detective. I want to be. That's what I want to do. You feel you get to help people. You get to. It's just such a cool thing, and I don't know why. I think it's just either part of you or it's not. But you're right. It's not an easy job. It's challenging. In today's climate, it's even harder. And cops out there. There's a lot of men and women that are doing the law enforcement job, and it is a thankless job. And we don't do it for the money. We do it. We have a passion for it. Kind of hard to explain, but it's just. I just felt like as a kid, that's where I wanted to go with it. I wanted to do that, and it's a necessary job. It's rewarding and fulfilling, as well as challenging. But I don't know what else I'd do if I didn't do this job. I don't know what else I'd do. So.
Well, to be honest. I think the vast majority of society is grateful for you guys and for the jobs that you do. And, especially, I know as a business owner, I wouldn't be able to do my job if it wasn't for you guys doing your job. And that's one of the things that I think a lot of people miss they think that if especially the ones that are all like defunding the police, and not to get this political by any means, but understanding that you know if nothing is happening, it's because that law enforcement is out there making sure that nothing happens. And yeah, your very presence is one of the reasons. It's a deterrent. And like I said, there's no business that could function without the security that society offers, and security is provided because of law enforcement. And that, again, that's one of those things that I point out every opportunity I can. I'm just like, hey, you know what? If you want to see what the wild wild west was like, then let's just get rid of cops, because you will not only have to conduct business, but you'll also have to conduct your own security. And I don't think there's very many of us that could do that very well. So in conjunction with what you were saying, of why you initially got into law enforcement, but you also kind of stated why you're still in it. And it's I imagine the moments like when you helped solve this case, and when you actually were able to close this case. Actually, those kind of moments are what enable you to continue going. If or maybe I'm putting words in your mouth, but what do you think?
Absolutely. We lose more than we win for sure with this job. Um, but the wins make it worth it when you get to help people and you get to see that help people in their lives, help a family, help a victim, help, enact some kind of justice, with perpetrators as well, some kind of accountability. Law and order is just a necessity in our country and in our world. That there needs to be law and order, and it takes all of us to make the world go around, right? We all have our place and our purpose, and we couldn't do without each other, and we couldn't do without you, and what you do as well. And so it takes all of us to make the world go around, and it is persistence and patience, and despite the hard times, the good times come too. And there's a reason that I've stayed in the job, because I love it. I love the job, and I love what it represents. I'm a very patriotic person. I love this country, and I think we have to have our military, our first responders, keeping and preserving freedoms and fighting for what's good and for what's right. And we all have a part to play, as American citizens and members of our community, to help each other, to do what's right, to step up and help when it's needed. And again, we couldn't do without each other. So it's what makes things work, and makes you like, okay, I can get up today and do this today, do it again. There's crazy stuff going on in the world, and there's certainly a lot of bad stuff. But I think we'd have to remember there's more good than bad. If you really focus on it, there's a lot of good out there, a lot of good people, and most people want to do what's right and do good things. And I think we have to remember that there's more good than bad, and we have to keep that perspective, keep our chin up. So
Yeah, well, I'd say that's a perfect moment to end on right there, man. I can't tell you enough how much I appreciate you coming on,
thank you.
and just keep up the great work, because I know that's the only thing we got to do is get SBI an M-Vac of their own.
Yeah, yep. That'd be a good thing to do. So
All right, well, that's your next task, I guess.
yep.
All right, Brian. Thank you, sir,
Thank
and we will hopefully run into you again.
Thanks, Jared.
And we can. You're just right down the street from us, man. We need to go do lunch.
We should do that. So hit me up anytime. But thanks for all your help and what you've done, and I appreciate you having us on and kind of telling the story. It's worth telling, and if we can enlist the public's help in more cases, cold cases, more keeping an open mind to this stuff, we can solve more cases. We can keep solving these cases if we keep doing that kind of thing. So I thank you for getting the word out there, and doing good with what we're given. So thanks, Jared.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Jared. I appreciate it.
Okay. Hey, is there any kind of a website or any place that you would recommend people go if they want to get involved?
So yeah, so if you look up, you could just Google Utah Department of Public Safety. There's a cold case database that you could link up to. It's through our Bureau of Criminal Identification, so BCI. There's a website there for our cold case database, our missing persons. A lot of states have something similar to it. Utah does have one. You could jump on there. There's these cases are on there. You can link up with them, and so that would probably be a good starting point. So the Utah Department of Public Safety, again, we have the SIAC here. We have Kathy Mackey, who is incredible. She's completely up to speed on all these cases. She's the go-to person for that stuff for sure.
Thanks for joining us. Your attention today brings us one step closer to exposing and eliminating the evil that brings crime to our communities. Hit subscribe and share this episode. Together, we will bring justice to every victim.